Hey everybody, welcome into another episode of the Clayton Britt Show. Today we are going to be talking about how to decide whether or not you want to sponsor a pro sports team. So this is definitely a little bit different content than what I've put out with my NBA Finals recaps, with my PGA Tour versus Live Golf. But I actually have a little bit of experience in this space, and it's I think a question that's very fascinating, and so I kind of want to talk you guys through it. So some of you may know that I worked at Chime for a little while. It's a financial technology company, and they provide banking services to people. You should go check it out. It's great. There's no fees. You don't get screwed anywhere in the process. It's really great. So I was an intern at one point and then a junior analyst on their marketing team, and I was on the brand side and the paid side of the marketing team. But I kind of got put in as one of at that point in time, the company wasn't that big. And so I was pretty much one of the biggest sports fans in the marketing department. And so at one point in time, my boss asked me, "Hey, do you think we should sponsor an NBA team?" And my initial gut reaction is like, well, yes, this is awesome. Let's do it. But then I had to actually use my brain and say, well, what do we need to know in order to figure that question out? And so I created a bunch of different questions that I needed to answer, and I'll walk you through the jersey patch deal that we ended up doing with the Mavs. And then another project I also worked on was Money Moves, which is something we did with the NFL with CeeDee Lamb, Eddie Jackson, and Josh Jacobs. So that was in partnership with Visa and the NFL. And so it's good because I now have experience working with two different leagues in the NFL and the NBA. And so I'm going to talk you guys through the differences in working with those leagues and kind of the pros and cons to each. But so going back to he asked me, should we sponsor an NBA team? But if we're talking about sports in general, the first big question you have to start with is sports, yes or no? Do we want to investigate sports as a marketing vertical? Luckily for us, we had some research that said, hey, a lot of Chime members are NBA fans. So we knew that was a good market for us, and they had done some small amounts of advertising with the NBA, and they had seemed to perform well. So that's where we decided NBA. But for other people, you kind of have to look at all the different leagues, and ideally you have some of that ancillary research that says, our company, a lot of the members or customers or users are NHL fans or NFL fans or MLS fans. And so you have to pick, because each sport has slightly different demographics for who watches it. It's not saying it's all one or all like another kind of person, but each sport has its own differences in user base, and you have to decide what you want to target. So once we figured out we want to do a test into sports, then once we had decided sports, we had then decided NBA. So other people will then need to pick, like, what sport do we want to invest in? So that's where you cross-reference your member research that has been done. And then the next question you need to answer is, what kind of sponsorship are we looking for? So then this brings in a couple other things of, what's the budget? Do we have $50,000 to spend, $100,000, $500,000, $1 million, $10 million, $50 million? It's very budget depending, because if you want to do an NBA league sponsorship, it may cost you $30 to $50 million a year, depending on the category, whether you're the official liquor of the NBA like Hennessy, or you're an official banking partner for the league. So league-wide deals are very big, but if you wanted to go and be the official banking sponsor of the Sacramento Kings and get some exclusivity on that market, it may only cost you $100K. So you have to decide what your budget is, but also what are your goals of what are you trying to get out of this sponsorship. And so for Chime, one of the things that they were really focused on is brand building. They want as a company that has it's a digital, like it's digital banking, so they have no branches. And so it was important to them to build trust and establish credibility, and also have you see it somewhere else besides just the app on your phone, because you're established and then connected with another institution. And so they're kind of endorsing you and you're endorsing them. So we wanted to build trust. We wanted to continue to aggressively grow the user base. And we also wanted to invest in brand, because I think one thing that they've done really well at Chime is they have tried to connect people with the company and make sure that they're really working to solve all of their members' needs. And so they wanted to continue investing in brand, building trust, and continuing to grow the user base aggressively. So with that being said, another part, I'm sorry I've been jumping around a little bit. This is a very wide-ranging and difficult question to answer, and so the problem I have here is not coming up with what to tell you, but it's deciding what to tell you and when to tell you it. So bear with me here while I try and figure out the best way to do this. Written down a bunch of notes, set up a structure, still not easy, but that's why we're doing the podcast. I digress. So you also need to see what kind of responsibility and commitment you want to have, because while having an unlimited budget is great, if you don't have the people internally to help run the partnership and make sure everything's going smoothly and be involved, then maybe you want something that's less of a responsibility. So you have to decide based on your goals, your company, what you want out of it. And so I think in Chime's case, they wanted to be really involved because it's their brand and they're very protective over it, as they should be. And with something new like this, you want to make sure it goes well. And the best way to do that is help to be involved. I mean, the teams are all professionals, but everybody has things that they believe they can do well. And so at Chime, we just wanted to make sure that we were helping the Mavs and the Mavs were helping us. So then we've kind of established that we want to do sports in general. We established what sport for Chime was the NBA and what kind of sponsorship. We wanted something that was involved where we can really be a part of the community, because that's how you build the trust. And that's also how you hopefully grow, in addition to getting the brand awareness. And then the next question is, who's available? So this is where a lot of my research came in of, I'll put it up on the screen for you guys to see. I created this massive spreadsheet that has number of nationally televised games, team, sponsor, most recent sponsor, the year the contract ends, the price annually in millions, the number of 2019 All-Stars going into 2019-2020 season, the wins, and then the win percentage. So the first question of who is available, that's when you look at the year the contract ends, and you can see that a lot of the teams, because I believe it started in 2018 with a 2-year deal, or maybe 2017 with a 3-year deal. So most of the contracts ended in 2020, so there was a lot of people that were kind of up for grabs who maybe we don't get them immediately, but we can get them in the future. So then you had to figure out who's available, which is great. So now we have all of that. And then you had to figure out who's available that you want to work with. And so then you pick teams. This gets into the conversation of sentiment around teams, which is additional research that you have to do. Because what if, to call out a team, what if everybody hates the Milwaukee Bucks? I don't think that's the case. But if everybody hates the Milwaukee Bucks, you don't want to partner with the Milwaukee Bucks and then alienate your customers or members that feel negatively about that team. So you need to do more research about the sentiment regarding the team and the players. And so that's another thing to consider. And you also want a team that you can get good value from. And so now the question of value is another big discussion that we can go in. Where do you feel there is value? What creates value in terms of a sponsorship? So one, social media presence, and this is, I guess, Jersey Patch specific, but I think it is generally applicable to most things. So the social media presence, because if you're trying to win a local market, you want to be present in the for social in that area. For the Jersey Patch, the number of nationally televised games that your team has. We also want to know the star players, the price in relation to other teams, and generally the trajectory of the team. So there is a bunch of things where you could pay a lot for something, but it could still be a good value because let's say something's worth a house that's worth $1 million. You pay $800,000, which is a lot, but you're still getting good value because it's $200,000 under the asking price. So what you have to do is determine where you seek value. And so for us, one of the main things we were looking at besides social was number of nationally televised games. So a team can get or up to 30 nationally televised games. So looking at this chart, you see the Warriors had 30, the Lakers had 29, the Clippers 27, Celtics 26. And it's fluid as the season goes on. Like the NFL, you can flex in and out of games because if, let's say, Toronto, who had 11 at the time, is on fire, they might give them one or two more than and take one or two away from New Orleans because Zion would get hurt, something along those lines. But so what I found in this research, cross-referencing with win percentage, so this is all about seeking alpha and finding a good deal. And at a company that is filled with a lot of people that are data-oriented, I had to try and figure out a way to quantify the value that we were getting by choosing the Mavs versus choosing another team. And how I did that, or one of the ways that I did this, not the only way, is in the win percentage column, you can see that. So looking in the win percentage column, you can see that the Lakers had 29 nationally televised games, yet their win percentage was .451, where if you go below them, the Clippers and the Celtics and Houston and Milwaukee all had higher win totals, yet they had less nationally televised games. And so, as many talk shows and sports debate shows will tell you, that the NBA is a star driven league. And I've heard it 1,000 times, but I never actually understood what that meant. Besides saying when there's only five guys on the court, the best guy can influence more so than maybe the best guy in the NFL or the best guy in the NHL because there's less players out there, therefore outsized influence. However, I didn't actually think it would correlate to kind of the sports business aspect, which is the Lakers' win percentage was lower, but they had more nationally televised games because if you look at the All Stars, they had number of All Stars going into the season was two, and one of those is LeBron James, who's kind of the biggest draw in the NBA. And so what that showed me is that you can have a team that wins more but gets less nationally televised games. And as a jersey sponsor, you obviously you want to be associated with winning because that's a big part of it. Nobody wants to be associated with losing, but you are really trying to find a team with one star or with two stars that are going to get more of the nationally televised games because that's where you get the most ratings. And so what I tried to do is pick a team or a star. So if you look at Dallas at that point in time, number of all-stars going into the season, 0. However, I kind of decided to hitch my wagon onto Luka Doncic and say that over the next couple of years, he's definitely going to be an all-star. He's going to be an MVP candidate, and he's going to, one, get them to win more, but two, he's going to become a bigger and bigger draw. And so for a team that only had 13 nationally televised games, there was a lot of room to go up. And since they hadn't won that much and Luka wasn't the Luka that we know now, or hadn't fully turned into him, we could get some good value because so pretty much I became a little bit of a general manager and tried to predict the trajectory of the team. And I said Dallas is a great team because of the young stars. They're going to get more nationally televised games. They're going to start winning more. And ideally, they can eventually make some playoff runs. Wouldn't you know, this year they get to the Western Conference Finals versus the Golden State Warriors. So that was great. But that was a big piece of information that was found of it is more about the all-stars and less about the win percentage in order to get an additional value from the nationally televised games. And then once we figured out all the nationally televised games, then we went into some social media metrics of there were kind of two main teams we were considering. The other will stay anonymous, but we were comparing star to star comparison. We were comparing the sentiment of the teams. So Dallas had a slightly favorable sentiment overall. People were positive because of Dirk and Cuban and all these things that generally the Mavs were looked at pretty well by the average fan. But then we did some star to star comparisons with social media. And so comparing Luka to the top star, or one of the top stars on the other team, we found that his engagement rate was more than double. And he got more comments, way more likes. And so that's really big because engagement rate is a great way to show if people actually care. And then a high level Instagram, Luca had 3.4 million followers on Insta. He'd post 3 times a week, 319,000 average likes, and his video views would get 1.2 million. And I think images with the jersey patch out of the last 30 posts, it was 16 because it's great to be on the jersey, but if your star player isn't actually posting with the jersey on, it's less valuable than you think. This also goes into another thing of the Mavs had just redone their stadium lighting, and so they have some of the best courtside photos of any franchise because of the new light side setup. So not only is Luca posting the patch a lot and the Mavs posting the patch a lot, but they're posting the patch and it's highly visible because of the lighting. So these are all different things to consider of the social media presence, the nationally televised games, the star players, the sentiment, the market price in relation to other teams, but also the market price in relation to where you believe the trajectory of the team is going. So there's a lot of stuff to consider when deciding if you want to do a jersey patch. And so another question that you then have to find out is so we found out we wanted to get into sports. We found out we wanted to get in the NBA. We found out we were looking for a bigger commitment because of the reach and impact that it would allow us to have. We found out who's available. We then, by doing the sentiment and the brand research, found out who's available that we want to work with. It's also not just how everybody thinks about the team as a fan, but it's the internal team and do we work well with them? Are they responsive to our questions and our needs? And do we want to continue to work with them in the future? Because at most jobs, you don't really get to choose who you work with, but with a partner in a situation like this, you do. And so you make sure to put in that extra effort, and the people at the Mavs are great. And so that was a big part of the reason why we wanted to work with them too. And then after we figured out who's available that we want to work with and could get a good deal and some value from them, you need to prove internally that you can get a good deal with the metrics and all of those things. And so one of the big things was for us, we knew that if the Mavs started, because it's a big risk doing this. I'm making it sound all very rational and in a vacuum and binary, but it's a really big risk. I mean, this is pretty much some of the most expensive sponsorships in all of American sports, and so it's a big risk for a lot of these people, and convincing them that they're going to get a good deal is hard. But the way to do that is there was some Nielsen analytics that we were sent, which talks about the value per round of the playoffs, the incremental value. And I believe the first round is like $1 or $2 an incremental. The second round is like 3 to 4. Western Conference Finals is 5 to 7, And this is building on top of the 1 to 2 from, and then the like 3 to 5 from the second round, and then the third round, and then the NBA Finals is an additional, I believe, like $10 million in media value, if you were to instead have to pay for those advertising spots. So one of the things that was big for us is, do we believe they can be a winner long term? And we looked at the roster and all those things and bet on Luka, and Luka proved us right. So that is great. And then we ended up doing the deal with the Mavs, and it turned out awesome. And I think we're very happy with it. And I believe they're happy with us as a partner too. And then one thing I quickly forgot to touch on is, not only do you have to figure out what teams are available, but you have to figure out what market you want to be in. And so for why we chose Dallas, Dallas Fort Worth region has historically been a great market for Chime. And they also, I think, are moving into either second or third on most populated metroplex area in the United States, behind, I think, LA and New York. I think they're about to eclipse Chicago. Um, and so the question is, do we want to double down in an area that's great for us, or do we want to go and explore a new area and try and grow in a different market than we're used to? And I believe we made the deliberation that we wanted to really try and own the Dallas market, and with something that's such a big risk with this sponsorship, I think it was nice to have the safety of, we know this is a market where we do well. And if it was going to be a flop, it would have been less of a flop because of the backstop of, we know Dallas is a good region for us. So that was another thing to consider too. Um, and then there's also a lot of in-stadium stuff and activations that come along with the jersey patch sponsorship. And so there will be Chime branded ATMs. We're the exclusive free throw sponsor. So the whole stadium lights up. We get these vent stacks outside. We get L bars. We get sideline stuff. We get it's on the jerseys when they sell the jerseys. All of these things, hundreds of little things that I don't want to bore you with. If you have any questions, reach out to me. Happy to answer them. But it's not just the jersey patch. It's not just the social media posts. It is really an all encompassing partnership, because you're the biggest thing in their world. Where part of what goes into the decision of what kind of sponsorship are we looking for is responsibility and commitment. But that also goes for them too, because you're going to get the most attention when you're the biggest thing in their world, versus maybe you go and sponsor something smaller with the NFL. You do not get that visibility nor the attention that you would when being the biggest thing in kind of in the NBA team's world. So that's another thing to think about. Um, and then going on and transitioning to something a little bit different, to compare across the leagues. What So I'm definitely biased on this topic. I'll throw that out there. I'm a believer that I think the NBA is the best marketing medium in sports. Um, and I feel that way because the NBA is a good blend of fast moving and still shots. Because when guys are at the free throw line, it zooms in on kind of their head and their chest, and you see the patch very clearly, which is something that doesn't really happen in a lot of other major sports. The people are also close to the action in the NBA. NBA jerseys are a part of pop culture and just culture in general. And so having the patch on the jersey is great. A little side note, the lead time for Nike, I think, is about 9 to 12 months for making the jerseys. And to air a grievance of mine, I don't think Nike does a good enough job pushing the jerseys with the patch on them for sales, because it takes them a long time to make it, but they also upcharge those specific jerseys, where that we've done some tests, and the jerseys with the patch are actually preferred by the fan, but Nike makes them very hard to find and more expensive. And so it's kind of not really fair to the partners because part of the draw is when you sell a jersey with Chime on it, people are wearing around Chime, and that marketing will continue for as long as people are wearing the jerseys. And so having something that you can see and you can touch when you're a digital brand is really important. And so that's kind of a gripe that I have with Nike. If anybody from Nike wants to come on, we can hash this out. That would be great. But back to the regularly scheduled programming here. Um, the NBA also has recap posts where it's, I think they're kind of nightly recaps, or maybe it's weekly or bi-weekly, however, and bi-weekly is in twice a week, not every 2 weeks. And those posts get a couple 100,000 likes. And if your star player has a big night and you're the first slide, you're going to get 400,000 likes and a couple million eyeballs on the Instagram. And so, and Twitter and Facebook. And so that's a big value add. That's something that we don't have to pay for additionally, which is really nice. So overall, I think NBA is great. Going into the NHL, I think the NHL is in a really bad spot with this because the players are moving very quickly. You're far away because how big the ice is and the glass. The fans are very involved in the NHL team or with their teams in the NHL, but they need to kind of put in work on how to make there more marketing opportunities. So they've done some stuff with digital signage on the ice. And by that, I mean it's like overlays for the broadcast. You don't actually see it in stadium. But so I think they've done a good job of that, which allows them to kind of move inventory and not just have the posts on the or like the signage on the boards that wrap around the arena. They also have added helmet sponsorships. Um, but when the guys are moving so fast, you can't really see it. So I think one of them, the Penguins have like PPG paints or something, and the Bruins, I believe, have like TD Garden. I don't really know, and I definitely enjoy hockey, so that kind of shows you the effectiveness. Um, and then one thing that hockey does have going for them is they're a slightly wealthier fan base. So then this then goes back to the demographics question initially of who are you trying to target. So if you have a product, maybe a higher end car, it could be something that you want to advertise with the NHL because of the slightly wealthier fan base, because hockey is an expensive sport, which means more barrier to entry, which means if you're playing hockey, you ipso facto probably have slightly uh, or you're probably slightly wealthier. Um, but overall, I think the NHL is in a very bad space. The MLB, I think there's opportunities, but I believe baseball's dying as a whole. The thing that I they did a trial on, and I'm not sure of the current status, is they had kind of like a jersey patch, but on the sleeve. So if you're batting righty, you would be on your left sleeve, and then when they have the camera facing you, you're pretty still, and then you have the logo on the sleeve. So that'll be interesting to see if they end up doing that. I believe they will. Um, but with baseball being filled with so many traditionalists, I'm sure it'll be met with much pushback, and then eventually people will stop caring like they do with all other sports. Um, and then the NFL, what is great about the NFL is their reach. They have the most fans, people are the most involved. It's awesome. However, the NFL is so protective and strict regarding their brand that they have the most restrictions and things we have to work around of the amount of legal and like regulatory stuff we had to do with the NFL and Visa working through them for our Money Moose partnership is actually, frankly, ridiculous. But I understand the NFL is careful and protecting the shield and protecting their national sponsors, and so I get it. But you definitely can't do as much as you can with the NBA or going on to something like the MLS. And then last quick note about the NFL, they have practice patch jerseys. So on the practice jerseys, there's a patch similar to NBA. I think 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches, maybe a little bigger. But it's only on practice gear. I imagine in the future, as they're looking to maximize revenues, I imagine in the future they'll do it, but I don't see it happening sooner than 2025. So they'll be the last to go into the jersey patch world, I believe. Um, but then going to MLS, MLS is a different audience than a lot of other sports, but I think it is a great opportunity for jersey sponsorship because of the size of. I touched on this when talking about having something tangible for a digital brand. With the MLS, the sponsorship on the front is huge. Every person that buys a jersey, that, like, if you're a Philadelphia Union fan and it says like Zulily on the front, that is a walking billboard for your team and your company. And so I think they also get creative with the designs. There's less restrictions than the NFL. And so I think there's a lot of cool integrations you can do because the MLS is most willing to work with the partners. And you can be that big fish in a smaller pond. And having people that are walking billboards and the fans that are buying the jerseys because they look cool and the styles change frequently. I think that's a great opportunity. And then quickly touching on esports, I think esports is great. This is Esports is an opportunity to do um, the most integrations and involvement and get the streamers and like players using your product and really endorsing it. Um, and so I think esports is a great opportunity, but then again, it has a lot less reach than the NFL for the most part. Obviously, there's select esports competitions and things that get ridiculous views. So I'm not doubting the strength of esports. I'm well aware. But in terms of mainstream population and general culture, esports is not what the NFL is, which isn't really a slight on esports. It's more a compliment to the NFL. But you can do lots of cool stuff with esports, but it goes back to the question of, is that the demographic that you want to partner with or really dive into, because it's mostly younger people. They're very digitally native. So with a digital product like Chime, um, it definitely overlaps really well, but it's all about finding the right partners and the right team in order to make it seem authentic and genuinely have a connection with your partners and with your partners' viewers and fans. And then, kind of the last big sponsorship medium that I'm going to touch on today is stadium sponsorships. So, I have done a bunch of research on this, and I think stadium sponsorships are really cool because it allows you to have integrations and things that are unique to only that space. And so you can give discounts to people that would use a Chime card. You can give merchandise discounts. You can have different Chime branded things. And it's up for not just the NBA games, but it's up for the concerts and the comedians and all of the events, all the conferences. So anything that happens at a stadium, you're there. You kind of become a staple in the community too, which is cool. Like, I know everybody in Boston, everybody knows what the Garden is, whether they make the connection to TD Garden, everybody knows what the Garden is. And so I think that's something that's really unique about stadium sponsorships. And the pricing definitely varies a lot. I mean, you could get some MLB ballparks, or I think as low as 4 million annual value. But then SoFi Stadium just signed a deal for 20 million a year with SoFi because they have both the Chargers and they have the Rams, and then they're getting the Olympic opening ceremonies. I believe a college football national championship, different Olympic events, some World Cup stuff. So that's the most expensive stadium sponsorship in American sports, but I think it is a good deal for SoFi because of just all the conversations, and with such a high tech and incredible stadium like that, uh, it's the ultimate brand association for just high tech efficiency, quality experience, comfort, class, all those things, all these intangibles that as a brand you're constantly searching for and trying to get people to associate you with. It's a great way to do it. However, the stadium sponsorship deals are massive in length. It's a 20-year deal, it's a 15-year deal. I mean, I would be surprised if you can get a stadium deal for almost less than 10 years. So I had looked into some of that, and these people are asking for 8 million a year, 10 million a year for 20 years, and it seems like a good idea, but with a company that was really young like Chime, it's like, well, I don't know if I'm going to want to do this in 20 years. It's kind of like having a dog. You really want a dog in the beginning, but as a younger person, you're like, am I going to want a dog 3 years from now when my life is more hectic? And so we decided to not go away from that route and put kind of the funds elsewhere and different avenues and all that stuff. But yeah, I think this has been a pretty good breakdown. So just to kind of go back and cover what we have walked through, we have walked through the questions of um sorry, I'm pulling it back. We've walked through the questions of, do you want to investigate sports as a marketing vertical? We talked about what sport do you want to invest in and why. And so you're going to cross reference your member research with that in order to figure out what sports would be best for you. Then you have to establish what kind of sponsorship you're looking for by budget, but also by commitment and responsibility and involvement. So there are tons of different options because these teams are all trying to get every cent out of their team that they can. So if they're if you have an idea, they're happy to try and work through it with you because they're trying to make as much money as possible. So get creative. Then you have to figure out who's available. Then you have to figure out who's available that you want to work with, um, in terms of sentiment of the team, but also in terms of the people at the company, because people are ultimately what make a difference and what make things so great or so terrible. Then you have to figure out who's available that you want to work with, that you can get a good deal slash value from. So I had to go through that process. I thought I had a good deal, I could get some value, but then you have to go and prove that it's a good deal with the metrics and the research, and connect it to the company goals and the values. And then you have to convince everybody else to believe in you and believe in the partner that you want to work with. And then you have to get lucky and get lucky again and get lucky again. And then hopefully you sign the deal, it works out, and it's a home run. So, yeah, thank you for listening to another episode of The Clayton Britt Show. I definitely had fun with this one. I hope it was very informative, and I look forward to talking soon. Thanks.